Howdy doody, everybody. Welcome back to the fourth installment of Oneyplays inspired cookery. I'm your host, me again. This fourth and final video in this series is inspired by the great rat destroyer of our generation, Lyle Wrath. Should have named him Lyle Rat, if you know what I'm saying. This Lyle inspired dessert, if you will, is a riff on a dessert called fried milk, which is way more delicious than it sounds. And we're going to make the fried milk look like those blocks of rat poison that you just kind of leave in the alleyway in honor of this great rat warrior and savior of New York City. She's coming into frame. This is Ember, everyone. Say hi. Say hi to the lovely people that you want to be in front of so bad. All right, enough fooling around. Let's just get right into it, shall we? As usual, everything in front of you right here is everything that you're going to need, with the exception of frying oil. We are making fried milk, so you're going to need a nice big vat of oil to fry everything in. And you may be noticing that I'm not using those good old-fashioned freedom units to describe all the materials I have here. The reason for that is because it's just much more consistent to weigh out your ingredients for something like this. And it's my opinion that everybody should own a cooking scale anyways. I think it's just as much of an investment as like a really nice Dutch oven. They're not that expensive, and it's one of those things where it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Just get yourself a kitchen scale. It'll save you so much headache, especially if you're trying to get into baking or any sort of confectionery work. So now that you know everything you're going to need, let's first do a little bit of prep before we get to cooking. Number one, you're going to need a container to pour the milk pudding into once we're done with the first step on the stove. A container with straight-ish walls is preferred, but it's not strictly necessary. It just results in a nicer looking product. And before we get to any cooking, we of course want to lube up our container. So just a little squirt of oil in there, and just get your hand in there. Oh yeah, just lube that shit up, brother. Really grease that bad boy up. You can use cooking spray for this step, but I prefer to do it this way since you can control exactly how much oil is going in there. And let's face it, it's nice to just kind of rub your hand with some oil. This is the only form of prep we're going to have to worry about for the time being. So let's get right to cooking so you can see what we're going to end up pouring in here. So here on the stove, what we're going to be doing is making the milk pudding that will eventually become the fried milk. What that consists of is obviously milk, and we're going to pour in most of this, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Leave about that much in whatever container you got. Then we're going to pour in our sugar, a couple, just a few drops of this food coloring. We're going to give that a whisk. And we're going to bring the heat up to about medium. Now while we're waiting for this to heat up, we're going to make our cornstarch slurry. So take your cornstarch here, pour it into that last little bit of milk that you got. Be careful, this stuff always makes a mess. And then either using your fingers, or I prefer a pair of chopsticks, just give this a mix with that little bit of milk. Depending on how much milk you left in here, it'll either be really easy, or like how it is with mine right now, really tough. The reason we're doing this instead of just dumping the cornstarch into our milk here is that we want the cornstarch to be pretty much fully dissolved before we add it to our milk mixture here. Otherwise we'll get like clumps, or the cornstarch won't cook properly. So we're just going to go ahead and mix this beforehand. This is known as a cornstarch slurry, if you didn't get that the first time. So now we're just waiting for this to come up to temp. We want it to get hot. We want it to get just under a boil before we add our cornstarch slurry. So you can see I'm using a whisk. That's only for the time being. Once we add our cornstarch slurry, it's going to get really thick really fast, and this whisk will become pretty much useless. So when that time comes, I'm going to switch over to a spatula, and that'll make for mixing the pudding way easier. The moment this starts to bubble, I mean like the instant it starts to boil, that's when we're going to add our vanilla, because if we add it now, we run the risk of evaporating too much of the vanilla off, and you know, we want that vanilla. That's what gives it the flavor. I'm also going to add just a tiny pinch of salt right now. Anytime you're making something sweet, it's never a bad idea to just throw a pinch of salt in there. It'll always just bring out whatever flavors you happen to have in that sweet thing. There it goes. You see it? You see it start to bubble? Give it one more mix. Let's just see. There it goes. There it goes. You see that? See that bubblage? That's when we're going to pull it off. I'm going to do a little cap full of, like maybe like 3/4 of a cap full of vanilla here in. And before I bring this back to the stove, this is when I'm going to add my cornstarch slurry. Coming with the spatula, Get all of our cornstarch slurry in there. And just whisk. Whisk like a fucking madman. You'll start to feel this thicken up pretty quickly. There it goes. Switch to the spatula. Oh yeah, you can see that. Look at that. That, my friend, is pudding. That was it. That was it. See how fast that went? I mean, we're talking like less than 30 seconds. It went from a liquid to this beautiful daboo-dee, daboo-die looking shit. This is done. Let's get it into our container. This is exactly why we lubed this bad boy up, because this stuff would stick like nobody's business. So let's get this into our container. Good sound too, you hear that? Lovely. Sometimes all it takes is a little. And there you have it. This is going to go into the fridge to completely set overnight, but there's a little trick I want to show you before we do that. This is everybody's favorite, a good old plastic wrap. And we're going to put it right on top here. Give it a good old slice here. And we're going to push this saran wrap to touch the top surface of our pudding here. Like so. We can put our lid on. And we can let this rest for about 10 minutes before we throw it into the fridge. That just ensures that it doesn't go into the fridge too hot. When you're only working with this much hot material going into the fridge, it's not a huge deal. But you still want to be cautious that you're not putting something in the fridge that's too hot. That's going to warm up everything else around it and making all that stuff yucky. So this part of the process is done. I will see you guys tomorrow. Whoa! After spending overnight in the fridge, this is the result. A fully set plank of milk pudding. We will unsheath this bad boy, peel off the plastic wrap, and you can see we have this perfectly set solid slab of milk pudding. So hopefully if we did our job right, this puppy should just slide right out. 1, 2. Oy vey. Not to worry, I should be able to get this out with the help of Old Reliable. Just run this knife gently. I don't know, you might be able to see just how easily it's already coming away from the wall. Okay. Let's try now. 1, 2, 3. Oh, mamma mia! Look at that. Look at that. A masterpiece. This is what you should end up with when all is said and done. And now, all we have to do is cut it into cubes. Personally, I like to glove up because I just don't like the ooey gooey goop sticking to my hands. So to make cutting through this easier, I'm going to take my knife and a paper towel and a couple drops of oil, just a little bit. You don't need a ton. I'm just going to lube up both sides thusly. And this won't make for a perfect cut, but it will make for a nicer cut. I'm not going to discard these, but I am going to set them aside because it'll look nicer. We've got these gorgeous looking cubes now. I'm going to transfer them over to this plate. And you know what? I lied. I am going to cut these. And look at that. We're one step closer to making this rat poison. So I now have a bunch of these beautiful little blue cubes. And all that's left to do before we fry them is to dredge them, which is super easy if you've never done it before. I have 3 substances here before me: cornstarch, egg, and panko. This is what's going to make up the breading of our fried milk. How this works is we're going to take a cube, coat it in the cornstarch fully. You don't want no wet spots. Try to knock off some of that excess cornstarch. Drop it in the egg, get that fully coated, and then into the breadcrumb. And you really want to coat this bad boy up. Don't be afraid. It should look like that in the end. And we're just going to do that for all these cubes here. One tip to keep in mind when you're dredging is try to keep one hand dry and one hand wet. I almost never follow that, but I'm legally obligated to tell you that's the best practice. So with that, let's keep going. The end result should look a little something like this. Every corner, every crevice, every surface is perfectly breaded. I mean, these bad boys are ready for frying. So I've brought this vat of oil up to temp. It's probably around 350 degrees, but I actually don't know for sure. There's actually a great trick that I like to use. Ever since I learned it, it's the only way I check to see if my oil is up to temp. And that's to take any wooden utensil, plop it into your oil, and look at the bubbles that come off of it. Depending on how violently those bubbles come off of your utensil, That's a good gauge to tell you how violently the bubbles are going to come off of whatever you throw into the oil. So I can tell by how violently this wooden spatula type thing bubbles that we are at the proper temperature. My setup here is stuff I'm going to fry, oil, wire rack on a sheet tray with paper towels under it. We want this type of receptacle for our fried object because this is going to allow the oil to drip off the easiest. I also have this spider here. I'm just going to load up with some of our fried milk. Oh, you hear that? That's the sound of beauty. I'm going to add about 6 or 7 of them at a time into here. We don't want to add them all at once. It'll bring the temperature of the oil down too quickly. And what we're looking for is just golden brown. There's a term in kitchens called GBD, golden brown and delicious. And you will definitely know what I'm talking about by the time it gets there. These are not going to take any more than like 5 minutes, and that's kind of on the high end. But you can see we're already getting some golden brown there. I'm just gently stirring these because they have a tendency to just settle on the bottom. And then see how that bit's a bit darker? If they settle on the bottom, they'll just start to burn on whatever side ends up on the bottom of the pot. Just like with all things when you fry them, just pay attention to the bubbles. That'll be your best indicator of how close they are to being done. The less bubbles there are, the closer it is to being done. Let's take a look. Oh yeah, that's what we're looking for. Just gonna plop the next batch in there. Don't be scared of the oil. This type of shit can smell your fear. Just keep on frying. So check that out. That is all of the fried milk we yielded from this recipe. Let's plate this up and give it a taste. And there you have it. Lyle's rat poison. I've got mine plated with this beautiful clear caramel sauce. And it just goes to... You don't know how to make this stuff? Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, it's not a big deal. You can serve this with any sweet sauce. Maple syrup, honey, sweetened condensed milk is a very popular one. Any sweet sauce that you fancy, you can serve with this. And with that, let's give this puppy a taste. Oh, look at that color. It's gorgeous. This is so good with this caramel sauce. If only there was a great video where you could learn how to make this exact sauce. It's so good. This is so good. This is one of those things where, like, you make it once for your friends or your family, and they're going to ask for it every single night. So there it is, folks. Lyle's rat poison. The 4th and final installment in this short little video series, where me, make a 4-course feast for these 4 funny boys. Once again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to watch this goofy little video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this video, feel free to check out my other ones. I'll be waiting there for you. Peace, toodles, and woo!